Okay, we got a lot to cover today. An Israeli Gaza ceasefire deal is being worked on as we speak. Let's take a look to this France 24 video, because I think it's actually pretty good.
More on this ceasefire deal is Andrew Hillier from our International Affairs desk. Andrew, there were a lot of delays, but the ceasefire deal is finally over the line.
It is almost over the line indeed. Earlier today, the Israeli Prime Minister's office confirming that a deal to return the hostages had been concluded after some last-minute issues had been resolved. Israeli media is reporting that the Security Cabinet is meeting now to ratify that deal. You'll remember, of course, that there was a lot of momentum yesterday, and that's when we thought the Security Cabinet was going to hold its meeting, followed by a full cabinet meeting of the government. Then that was postponed, the Prime Minister's office blaming Hamas for supposedly making last-minute demands. Hamas denied those reports, saying that they were fully committed to implementing the deal. Now, what isn't clear at the moment is exactly when the full cabinet meeting of the government will take place. It may take place on Saturday evening. Now, if that happens, there were fears that that could push back the timetable for the implementation of this deal. The deal, of course, is supposed to come into effect, the ceasefire, on Sunday, and that's when it's hoped the first batch of hostages will be released. There were
Okay, so let's just take a look real quick to kind of back up what he's talking about. So he says that the cabinet meeting was supposed to be the day before, but it's been pushed back. We can take a look at some of the reactions from Israel
on this
and see kind of the opposition to this ceasefire deal happening.
Jerusalem motorway, protesters are out in their numbers to show their opposition to the ceasefire deal reached with Hamas in Gaza. Police intervened to disperse the crowds and made a few arrests. The extreme right-wing organization Shala had urged protesters to take to the streets, categorically rejecting the potential release of 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. An opinion shared by several members of the Israeli government, including the National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir.
If this reckless deal is approved and implemented, the Jewish Power Party will give the resignation letter to the Prime Minister. The Jewish Power Party will not be part of the government and will withdraw from it.
Despite his threat, the right-wing minister assured that he would not bring down the government.
Jewish Power, led by me, will not overthrow Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and will not act together with the left. But it will not be able to be part of a government that will approve this deal.
In Tel Aviv, crowds gathered to ask for the return of the hostages. The agreement would see
So just one thing, obviously in the cities of Israel, they are going to be much more liberal than other parts of Israel, as cities always are. Itamar Ben-Gvir is the leader of the Jewish Power Party. That is exactly what it sounds like. It is a Jewish supremacist fascist party. It is analogous to the White Power Party. I mean, it is exactly what it sounds like. So this guy that you're hearing is completely a fascist, and he is in complete opposition to any kind of ceasefire deal with us.
33 of them, freed from the 94, still being held by Hamas. Their families are torn between hope and fear.
It's very hard days to hold it. We're broken, and we really hope that the deal will sign soon.
We just hope this period will be over.
The government has yet to vote on the truce agreement, but Benjamin Netanyahu is widely expected to pass it through without needing the votes of the far right.
Let's go to London.
And so we hear this analyst talking about how it's dangerous and we need this ceasefire deal to happen immediately because people are dying. So we have this article from CNN here, which says, man pleads for sister killed in Israeli strike shortly after ceasefire agreement announced. So it's the same with It's the exact same thing that Israel did with Hezbollah in Lebanon, where immediately after they announce a ceasefire, they try to kind of get their lumps in before the ceasefire deal actually goes through. So they're going into overdrive, killing as many people as possible.
Celebrations erupted in Gaza as word spread that a ceasefire had been agreed and that the guns would fall silent. They are not silent yet. Dozens have been killed in Israeli strikes since the announcement was made. Wake up, this brother says. The war is over. Wake up, Hala. But the war is ending too late for his sister. This intimate moment filmed just hours after leaders stood on stage announcing the deal. Also too late for many caught up in a barrage of Israeli airstrikes. This is truly a tragedy, the spokesperson of the Gaza Civil Defense says. The Israeli occupation does not want this blood waterfall to stop, as bombing is continuing until this moment. When asked about an increase in airstrikes, the IDF says it is continuing to dismantle Hamas military capabilities. Bodies are offloaded at the Al Ahli Baptist Hospital as well as the wounded. Children are once again among the victims, a recurring theme of this bloody war. We were sitting in our homes, this man says, when F-16 jets struck us, bringing the house down on top of us. Around 15 people were killed. We're waiting for the truce, hoping those who are missing and displaced will return. Rescuers pull bodies and survivors from under the rubble of a home with their bare hands in one Gaza City neighbourhood. The director of the Al Ahli Hospital accuses Israel of a, quote, desperate attempt to cause as much harm as possible, warning the hours before the ceasefire take hold are, quote, expected to be violent and painful for the people of Gaza.
And this is just the reality of Israel when they are bombing you. They have these bloodthirsty intentions, and really their only intention is to inflict as much damage upon their enemy as possible. This is what you have to expect. When you make a deal with them, they're going to try to, kill as many people as they possibly can before the deal goes through, and they're forced to stop actually attacking. And are they actually going to stop attacking during the ceasefire deal? That remains to be seen. Once again, we just have to keep in mind that throughout this entire process, a ceasefire deal is just step one. Step one is simply stopping the violence. That doesn't actually solve any of the underlying problems which caused this violent genocide to begin with, which is namely the apartheid state. So step two is really like tackling the apartheid state, and that involves really like normalizing relations between Palestinians and Israelis, and that's going to be a huge other process that's probably going to have to involve a lot of international bodies putting pressure on Israel to make the conditions for Palestinians better. And that, this is a great step one, but this doesn't actually solve any of the issues. It just stops the bleeding.
It would not be the first time we see an increase in violence in the hours and days before a ceasefire. For the residents of Gaza, joy is mixed with fear that Sunday's truce is still a long way away. Paula Hancock's CNN, Abu Dhabi.
When you heard that Elon Musk...
So it's telling that the far-right fascist party is trying their best to, delay the ceasefire deal from happening. And Netanyahu obviously is not in any rush to make the ceasefire deal go through either. And every day that this ceasefire deal gets pushed back, hundreds of more Palestinians die. So we can take a look at this. Al Jazeera has a live updates tab. Live, Israel kills over 110 in Gaza since ceasefire deal announcement. At least 113 Palestinians were killed, including 28 children and 31 women, in Israeli attacks on Gaza since the announcement of a ceasefire deal that is due to start on Sunday, according to the Enclave Civil Defense. Israel's cabinet is expected to convene a meeting today to approve the Gaza ceasefire agreement, according to reports. So this was posted today. So 7 minutes ago, this agreement must be followed through to the end, Israeli captive's mother. Einev Zangakar, the mother of 24-year-old Israeli captive Matan Zangakar, was among a group of captives' relatives who rallied this morning to call on the government to fully implement the ceasefire deal. For 469 days, our loved ones have been abandoned in captivity, and now finally there's hope, said Zangakar in comments carried by Israel's Aretz Sheva news site. This agreement must be followed through to the end to bring everyone home and end the war, she added. Ending the war, returning everyone, and returning to normalcy is in Israel's interest. This will be the beginning of the healing and rehabilitation process that the country so desperately needs. So just remember, fascism doesn't actually bring a good quality of life to the people that are living in these fascist imperialist countries. When you are in constant war, that actually greatly diminishes your rights and your standard of living. And sure, there are far-right conservative parties whose voices and their interests kind of drown out the will of more liberal, moderate people. But that doesn't actually mean that life is better for those liberal, moderate people. It might be better respectively for the far-right militants that really had nothing going on for them. Think of the incels that we have today. But now they're at the forefront of this fascist movement, and they get to dress up in military uniforms, and they have a shred of power that they can now taste. Life might be better for them, respectively, but it's not actually bringing up the standard of living for the majority of people in the country. So yeah, a lot of people in Israel don't like the war, even though they were fine with the apartheid state, because the apartheid state did have them experience a pretty good standard of living, but they're not really happy with this constant war and this constant expansion that Israel's going through. I mean, they don't want to get drafted. They don't want their kids to get drafted and die in a meaningless war. So they're calling for the ceasefire deal to go through. Crowds of Palestinians wait for food in Khan Yunis. Man, this is so messed up. Let's just take to just soak in these images. UN chief urges to end Israeli occupation in southern Lebanon. Yeah, that's a whole another thing where they're occupying southern Lebanon. They're occupying western Syria. Antonio Guterres has called for an end to Israel's continued occupation and military operations in southern Lebanon after a November ceasefire to end fighting between Israel and the Hezbollah armed group. The continued occupation by the Israeli military inside the UNIFIL area operations and the conduct of military operations in Lebanese territory are violations of Resolution 1701. They must stop. So this is a great sign, right? We have a perfect analog to the ceasefire deal that we're probably going to experience over the weekend, where Israel makes a ceasefire deal with Lebanon and then occupies southern Lebanon. It's going to be the exact same thing with Gaza, right? They're going to make this ceasefire deal and then just violate it on their own terms. They're not going to care about it at all. Israeli government to discuss approved ceasefire deal this afternoon. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz and the Times of Israel report that the Israeli government will convene at 3:30 p.m. to discuss and approve the ceasefire deal. The meeting was initially expected to take place after Shabbat, a weekly religious holiday that begins on Friday night and ends as dusk falls on Saturday. Okay, and we'll just read this update too. Gaza is still under relentless attack. The death toll is increasing. More than 100 Palestinians have been killed since this ceasefire deal was announced, and until now, attacks are intensifying on densely populated areas, including in Gaza City and northern border towns. We've been told by eyewitnesses in Jabalia al-Balad that the last hour has been marked by devastation, with air raids killing at least 2 civilians. They say they have seen Israeli quadcopter drones dropping bombs and grenades on the rooftop of buildings. Gotta kill those terrorist babies. Gotta kill those terrorist babies before they grow up and become terrorist adults. Palestinians believe that what is going on is a form of military pressure, a final push strategy by Israel. They know that the next 24 hours will be absolutely critical, but they do not know where or when the next attack will take place. Phase 1 of the ceasefire deal doesn't meet the needs of Gaza, ex-UN official. Martin Griffiths, the former UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, spoke to Al Jazeera about the ceasefire deal. The promises of Israeli withdrawal must be talked through, he said, adding that there needs to be a clear indication of when the Israeli authorities will allow aid to enter unimpeded. However, he said that within the humanitarian community, they are already seeing indications that the Israeli government is already looking for evidence of scapegoating and looking to blame Hamas for breakdown of the deal. That's exactly what we saw that one French reporter talking about, where Netanyahu is blaming Hamas for changing terms of the deal in order to push the deal back so they can kill more Palestinians. There's already lack of purpose. There's already much more doubt, I think, about moving to phase 2, he said, noting that the phase 1 of the ceasefire doesn't meet the needs of Gaza. Yeah. Of course, it's not going to meet the needs of Gaza. Like, this is all about Israel. Israel is doing a ceasefire on its own terms, on its own timeline, and it's going to break it on its own too. They don't care about the needs of Gaza at all. The only reason the ceasefire deal is happening is because Netanyahu cares about the needs of Netanyahu. He cares about getting the hostages released because that's been a political pressure on him. He cares about giving Trump a victory in the news so Trump can take office, say that just by me getting elected made there be a ceasefire deal happen. And that's going to be something that's like a little gift Netanyahu gives Trump, this ceasefire deal. So none of this is about the needs of Gaza, so we don't need to be surprised when the ceasefire deal doesn't meet the needs of Gaza. Israeli Captives Forum calls for protests in Tel Aviv. The Hostages and Missing Families Forum, which represents the relatives of Israeli captives in Gaza, has said on X that the demonstration will take place at the so-called Hostages Square. An entire nation waits to see all hostages return home, it said, adding, the current agreement must end only with the return of all hostages with a predetermined manner and timeline. So even the liberal groups in Israel really don't care about Palestinians at all. All they care about is getting their hostages back, which it's kind of dark to see. So let's take a look.
In the meantime, let's move from Washington now to the Middle East. Live picture there over Jerusalem, you see there, nighttime. Well, I want to put up this tweet from Barak Ravid there at Axios. He has this reporting that the Gaza hostage and ceasefire deal has officially been signed in Doha. Sources to Ravid there. Fox's Trey Yingst has more from the region.
Israeli airstrikes killed dozens in Gaza just a day after the announcement of a new ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Negotiators in Qatar brokered the three-phase deal that would see a pause in the fighting and the hostages returned home in exchange for more aid and the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. But on Thursday morning, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a last-minute disagreement is delaying his final approval, and he canceled a planned cabinet vote on the deal.
The Israeli government wants this deal to be finalized, but it cannot be a deal which is correct in some places and not in others.
The sticking point appears to be Israel's demand for a veto over which prisoners would be exchanged for the hostages. Hamas claims that was worked out during the negotiations, and it remains committed to the ceasefire deal.
We are now facing a new phase in our proud Gaza, through which we can confirm to the world that we are a free people who build and do not destroy.
Netanyahu could be stalling for time to sell the deal to his more conservative coalition partners. Some have threatened to leave the government if the agreement isn't amended, putting Netanyahu in a difficult position as he also faces pressure from the families of hostages to get the deal done.
We are, as you said, very much in limbo and extremely concerned that our government is not acting in good enough faith to make this happen.
The ceasefire was supposed to go into effect on Sunday, but Netanyahu says there will be no deal until Hamas backs down. In Tel Aviv, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
Trey, thanks so much. So Trey filing that report a little bit earlier today. We're getting some new details about whether or not the deal is final, reported by Axios there. Let's talk about all of this with our friend there, Union for Reform Judaism President Rabbi Rick Jacobs. He joins me. Rabbi Jacobs, thanks for being with us. We had to get you on. You and I have discussed this topic so often here. Is the deal final, or are there still outstanding snags, would you say?
It seems that there are still some outstanding snags. It may be details of the actual arrangement. You have to remember this is a deal that was largely formulated in May. And it certainly was something we had hoped for in May or June, July, August. Here we are in January. The details matter. The question of which hostages and which prisoners. When we talk about the Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, it sounds very benign, but many of those that are scheduled to be released are actually terrorists convicted of murdering many Israelis. So there's a lot of emotion there, but
It's so funny, right? Many of the prisoners in the jails are terrorists convicted of murdering people. So, we know that there was actually no due process to any of them, right? All of these were done in military courts. It's not like an independent body came in and legislated the war crimes of the Hamas soldiers that Israel captured. Just like Israel isn't letting anyone come in and legislate the war crimes of IDF soldiers. And we're seeing like IDF soldiers even afraid to travel now because they're afraid of getting arrested and tried for war crimes. So they're literally not leaving Israel because they don't want to be held accountable for their own actions. This guy that they're interviewing is a Zionist, and he's so cute when he's like, saying prisoners sounds benign, but did you know that many of those prisoners committed crimes? Yeah. Isn't that what the point of prison? So what he's admitting is that the majority of the prisoners didn't commit any crimes and they're actually innocent. I mean, this is your brain on Zionism. Did you? Yeah, we're doing a hostage negotiation. I mean, Israel has a ton of innocent hostages, but did you know that some of those hostages committed crimes and were soldiers? Okay, well, I'm sure some of the hostages in Hamas are also IDF soldiers. Are you opposed to the IDF soldiers being released by Hamas?
About the Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, it sounds very benign, but many of those that are scheduled to be released are actually terrorists convicted of murdering many Israelis. So there's a lot of emotion there. But as you also know, there's been a tremendous outpouring of support for this deal from across the political spectrum, but there's also a strong, I would say, far-right group that is protesting against the deal, and they're members of the coalition that are threatening to leave the coalition.
Far-right group is being generous. Once again, they are called the Jewish Power Party, literally a Jewish supremacist group. And he's saying, I would call it a far-right group. I think that's fair to... Oh, you think that's fair to say? You think that's fair to say? Thank you. Thank you for going out on a limb and calling the Jewish Power Party a far-right group. And then, just once again, like, people are celebrating this deal because they already got their revenge. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are destroyed. Lebanon's military is destroyed. Gaza's military is destroyed. Syria is destroyed. They were able to kill babies, women, soldiers, innocent civilians. Israel got their revenge. And so when you talk about how, well, we're releasing some people that were actually murderers, the vast majority are innocent, but some of them actually killed Israelis. People don't care about it because they know that they struck a critical blow to Gaza, and Gaza is never going to be the same. So even far-right groups are protesting this, but I think they're like, I don't know, it seems a little tongue-in-cheek to me because, A, they can violate the ceasefire deal at any point. They've done it in the past, and they're going to do it again. And B, they already had a lot of their bloodthirstiness satiated. I guess not enough for people in the Jewish Power Party.
If the deal goes through, Prime Minister Netanyahu is caught in a web. We were supposed to see on Sunday the first hostages coming free. It was going to be in 3 different tranches, but honestly, it's still a question. And the cabinet has not yet voted to approve the deal. So on Israel's side, it's not absolutely signed. We saw that Barak Ravid said that it was, but honestly,
This is so funny. What is this? Fox News Live now from Fox. The Chiron is literally Gaza ceasefire hostage deal officially signed, and the guy they're bringing on is saying it's not officially signed. Like their level of journalism is just underground.
Believe it when we see it.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to ask. I mean, is this a good deal? Is it a bad deal? Or is it just a deal?
You know what?
What the fuck kind of question is that? Is it a good deal, a bad deal, or just a deal? All right, so let's just listen to this response, and then we don't need to listen to any more drivel.
Families, as I have, they're desperate.
Yeah.
The longer there is not a deal, the less likely their loved ones are coming home alive. So this is a deal we have to swallow, and to give back these murderers is a hard price. But to get home Israelis who have been spending a year and a half in horrific conditions in the tunnels of Gaza, it simply has to be done. I think the majority of Israelis agree with that. And I think Jews and people of conscience around the world understand that it must happen.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, Rabbi, but the first and only deal that materialized back in November of 2023, did that also require a vote of the entire Knesset like this one?
It was a slightly different arrangement.
I see.
This is multi-phase. And also the question of, does this bring the war to an end? Is it a ceasefire? Is it a temporary truce? All those questions have gotten more heightened.
Okay.
I think we also have to pay attention to the U.S. administration that's been working on this, but credit has to also be given to President-elect Trump. His team, particularly Steve Witkoff, who is his Middle East envoy, has been in Qatar and has been a very important force in bringing the sides together. So a rare expression of partnership between the current American government and the incoming, but for a very noble cause.
Okay, so let's take a look at that. What was Trump's role in the ceasefire agreement? Al Jazeera, Trump's role in Gaza ceasefire fuels Arab-American anger with Biden. The incoming U.S. president suggested he pressured Israel to take the deal, which is supposed to go into effect on Sunday. When Samra Lukman voted for Donald Trump in November, she believed that even if there were a 1% chance that the former president would push for a ceasefire in Gaza, he would be a better option than the Democrats who would fail to stop the war. Trump ultimately won that race and is slated to re-enter the White House on Monday. And in the lead up to his inauguration, Israel and the Palestinian group Hamas have agreed to pause hostilities in Gaza, where more than 46,700 Palestinians have been killed in the last 15 months. And this is definitely an undercount. But Lukman says she doesn't feel vindicated, even though Trump has claimed credit for pushing the ceasefire deal over the line. Instead, she's outraged at outgoing United States President Joe Biden for failing to finalize the agreement months earlier. I'm just even more angry because Trump, who's not even in office, did a little arm twisting and the ceasefire agreement was done right away. This could have happened sooner. It's so sad, all those extra lives lost. She added that the way the agreement was reached solidified Biden's legacy as Genocide Joe, a nickname that links the Democratic leader to the Israeli abuses in Gaza. Yeah, I 100% agree with this analysis. Joe Biden could have stopped this. I mean, he could have stopped the genocide from happening, let alone ended the genocide. This is all on Joe Biden. Like, when you get right down to it, as genocidal and bloodthirsty as Netanyahu and the Jewish Power Party are, like post-October 7th, they were doing the genocide with the United States weapons, using United States bombs, and having diplomatic immunity by the United States throughout the entire course of this genocide. And Joe Biden was the chief architect of all of this support from America. So yes, I think it's pretty fair to say that this year-long genocide that we saw happen falls squarely on the shoulders of Joe Biden. The shift in American Arab... Okay, so let's see what Trump's role is. Amr Ghalib, the Yemeni American mayor of Hamtramck, Michigan, was among those who endorsed Trump last year. Okay, well, what was his role? So, Trump had warned earlier this month that all hell will break out if the Israeli captives are not released by the time he takes office on January 20th. Some analysts saw the message as a threat to Hamas, but the Palestinian group had repeatedly said it would accept the ceasefire deal laid out by Biden in May, which included a prisoner exchange and a permanent end to the war. It was Netanyahu who publicly stated on several occasions that his government intends to continue the war. Yeah, that's true. Still, Biden administration officials, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken, have insisted that Hamas has been blocking the agreement. Once again, Biden performing political and diplomatic defense for the violent actions of Netanyahu. Ala Rahirit, a former U.S. diplomat who resigned last year over the Biden administration's handling of the war, said the deal announced on Wednesday is the same proposal that had been on the table since May. Rahirit told Al Jazeera that the Biden administration's month-long failure to finalize the agreement was a matter of political will. If there was not a change in administration, I think we would have kept on hearing the exact same rhetoric of, "We're working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire," Rahirit said. She added that there would have been no shift had Harris gotten elected, but Trump's victory created the incentive to make the ceasefire deal happen. Concerns about agreement. Although Wednesday's announcement sparked jubilation in Gaza, Arab American advocates are cautious about celebrating just yet. It is not clear whether Israel will honor the deal. Israel has already killed dozens, push that up to hundreds now. Well, what was Trump's role? All right, let's just take a look. How the Biden and Trump teams work together to get this Gaza ceasefire and hostage deals done. When Qatar's prime minister emerged Wednesday to declare at long last that a ceasefire for a hostage deal had been struck in Gaza, representatives for two American administrations were on hand in Doha to bask in the victory. The cooperation between the two was almost unprecedented, as senior Biden administration officials said after the deal was clinched, made possibly by a rare intersection of interest between bitter rivals who both saw an opening following Trump's victory. Brett McGurk, the longtime Middle East negotiator for Joe Biden, had been planted in the Qatari capital for weeks in the hopes of a final agreement. He's joined in recent days by President-elect Donald Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff for the final push. At points, McGurk and Witkoff divvied up meetings across the Middle East to push the deal across the line, including critical talks between Witkoff and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last week. That McGurk joined by phone. Wow, dude. Literally, Biden's Middle East envoy is in the cuck chair. So Witkoff is having a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister face to face, and McGurk's in the cuck chair listening in on the phone. Dude, Biden is such a fucking ineffective, weak-ass little bitch of a world leader. He just sits there as Netanyahu walks all over him, gives Netanyahu $8 billion on his way out, and then is like, Trump's envoy comes in and he's like, "Okay, sir, I'll sit in the cuck chair and just watch as you actually fuck Netanyahu for me." This is so embarrassing. This is, Jesus Christ. Like, I know it's a dumb thing when Republicans say that Biden is a weak president or Kamala Harris would be a weak president and world leaders would be laughing at us. But goddamn, Biden's actions have been so embarrassing. As, like, honestly, as an American, just letting Israel walk all over us it makes me want to really want to just get Biden the fuck out of the White House. Ultimately, however, the deal enables both Biden and Trump to claim victory, not as a final bit of positive news. So, wait, this was it? If McGurk was focused primarily on the parameters of the deal, Witkoff was on hand to emphasize Trump's desire to see a deal finished before Inauguration Day. So, literally, all Witkoff did was say that Trump wants to see a ceasefire deal by Inauguration Day. And then Netanyahu, that was enough. That was enough pressure for Netanyahu to be like, "Okay, sir. Okay, I guess I'll get the ceasefire deal." Because he knows Trump's a fucking despot. He knows that he can walk all over Biden, so he's like, It's like when you have that ineffective mob boss who's asking for his money back, And the guy that he loaned money to is just like, yeah, I don't care. Ask me next week. I'm a little short today. Ask me next week. And he's like, okay. Next week comes by. Did you get that ceasefire deal done? I feel like killing a few more Palestinians today. Maybe next month we'll do it. Then Trump gets in. He's like, yeah, I will actually fuck you up if you don't like give me this ceasefire deal as a political win for myself, because I don't care about Palestinians, but I care about getting wins for myself. And he's like, okay, sir, I'll do it. So I don't know what kind of backdoor deal Trump has with Netanyahu, probably some kind of annexation of the West Bank if they get this like ceasefire deal done. So we'll see about that, but let's just let it be known that Biden could have, even if Biden wasn't going to give Netanyahu the West Bank, he could have said, we're not going to send you any weapons. And that's also political pressure that he could have placed onto Netanyahu. So let's just wrap this video up with this clip from the Majority Report, which I thought was really good.
It appears that the ceasefire is about to be signed. People should keep in mind what kind of failure this has been for the Biden administration. We have heard now from Jacob Lew, the ambassador to Israel, and from the United States. Before people start sending me emails like, why aren't you crediting Biden? He's been working all night.
People are saying that?
Well,
people need to...
You'd be surprised who I hear from. But if you read this Jacob Lew interview, where he was questioned about targeting, there are many questions about many incidents after every war. There's been a process of internally looking into things that might have gone wrong in different places that hasn't been resolved. When the secretary says there are still questions to be answered, there are still questions to be answered. In the IDF, there are still questions to be answered. But fundamentally, nothing that we ever said was just stop the war. You never heard criticism from the United States for Israel carrying out strikes for almost a year in southern Lebanon, attacking Hezbollah and diminishing Hezbollah. You have not heard a word of criticism from the White House, the State Department, the Defense Department of the United States of the operation in Rafah. I don't know who he's bragging to. We never had an arms embargo. Not in May, not since, never. So just to give you a sense of Biden never, ever utilized any of the leverage that the United States had to get the Israelis to stop the war, stop the attack on Gaza. Frankly, for that matter, let in significant and sufficient amounts of aid. Never did any of those things.
Historically precedented things, and now Trump's recent act is the new precedent.
I mean, I don't know why Israel is stopping the war now. I am not convinced of the story that Trump is leveraging this. Regardless, that will be the narrative. And here is Anthony Blinken saying what, and this was just, when was this? It was at the Atlantic Council in D.C. When was this? Just yesterday. If you recall, in December of 2023, Secretary of Defense Austin gave a speech where he said, you can win the battle and lose the war here. The idea that you are going to kill all of Hamas and rid Gaza of Hamas by attempting to kill all Hamas members was ridiculous from its inception. It was ridiculous from its inception because it is a function of the struggle against Israel. And any scholar on Hamas knows this. And anybody who's, and reporters and scholars about Hamas also know that it was Israel that built up Hamas as a way of undermining any type of Palestinian cohesion. It wanted a separate entity in the West Bank and a separate entity in Gaza and wanted them to keep Palestinian sovereignty from having any type of political cohesion. But the idea that you can kill tens of thousands of Palestinians, tens of thousands of Palestinian children, and not have Hamas regenerate itself. Maybe it won't be Hamas. Maybe it'll be post-Hamas. But not have a Palestinian independence movement and a violent one grow in its wake is just, it's absurd. That's why, you have Israeli historians, Israeli scholars, and then obviously non-Israeli ones, and multiple NGOs that say this is a genocide. You have former advisors to Netanyahu say it's an ethnic cleansing. Pick your poison. Here is Blinken admitting what people knew all along.
West Bank. Israel is expanding official settlements and nationalizing land at a faster clip than any time in the last decade, while turning a blind eye to unprecedented growth of illegal outposts. Violent attacks by extremist settlers against Palestinian civilians have reached record levels.
Pause it for a second. Incidentally, turning a blind eye, that's an interesting dynamic. I know that the U.S. has done some nominal sanctions on these West Bank expansions, but I mean, you should see the other stuff that Israel's doing. But go ahead.
Against Palestinian civilians have reached record levels. We've long made the point to the Israeli government that Hamas cannot be defeated by a military campaign alone, that without a clear alternative, a post-conflict plan, and a credible political rise for the Palestinians, Hamas, or something just as important and dangerous, will grow back. That's exactly what's happened in northern Gaza since October 7th. Each time Israel completes its military operations and pulls back, Hamas militants regroup and reemerge because there's nothing else to fill the void. Indeed, we assess that Hamas has recruited almost as many new militants as it has lost. That is a recipe for an enduring insurgency and perpetual war.
Wow, that's shocking. What? So, in other words, you have destroyed almost every hospital in Gaza. You have destroyed every university, nearly every school. You have shattered the lives of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, 1 million children. You have left thousands of orphans. You have killed off entire bloodlines and families. You have turned Gaza into dust and rubble. This is something that, what child of the 1 million+ children there in Gaza, their lives are not going to be completely dictated by this, their entire lives. And you have not essentially changed the number of Hamas fighters there are. You've killed some of your own hostages. And the only thing you've accomplished is killing probably at a minimum 150,000 Palestinians, ruin the lives of 4 times that many, 5 times that many, caused billions of dollars worth of destruction. And for what? For what? Zero gain. All destruction. It's like a fetish. Just horrible. Here's
okay. Oh, that's a different angle. All right, well, let's do this angle. So, listen. When the United States talks about how they're going to end the hostilities and we are going to support our allies, just keep in mind that the United States functions off of, at least in its foreign policy, it functions off of only one metric. And that metric is this going to expand the power of the United States? So when it says we're going to support Israel, we are going to give Israel everything that they need, and we are behind Israel 100%. We're not going to dictate Israel's policy because our policy is just to support Israel. The United States is basically being a wife guy, right? Oh, whatever you say, honey, we're just here to support you. So the United States is there to support Israel. When you hear our leaders and when you hear our congressman, when you hear our, the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, talking about how, our goal is to support Israel and we're going to reduce Hamas, we're going to get the hostages back. We can't have a ceasefire deal until Hamas releases the hostages. Just know that all of that is lies. It doesn't actually matter. It doesn't actually inform any of our public opinion. It doesn't inform our foreign policy at all. When you call your congressman and you say, why aren't you pushing for a ceasefire deal? And then your congressman says, well, my position is that I'm not going to push for a ceasefire deal until the hostages are released. That's just lying to you. That's just the narrative that they spin so that they have an excuse to not actually push for a ceasefire deal, not actually achieve anything. This is what the United States is. It is an imperialist country. Trump is ripping the mask off of this imperialism. And it is kind of true that if Joe Biden got reelected, we would still have Israel committing this genocide. We would not even be talking about a ceasefire deal at all. And I'm not saying they're going to stop committing genocide. I think they are going to annex the West Bank. I think they are going to annex Gaza. And they're going to commit mass ethnic cleansing and getting rid of all of the Palestinians that are living in those areas. But anyway, this is an important development, so I'm going to keep on top of it. I'm going to keep covering it. And hopefully we do see some good things coming out of it. But just remember that the United States always acts in interest to further its own power. And if whatever representatives of the United States' foreign interests tell you, it's usually lies. And we really just need to see the effective results of U.S. actions. And the effective results of the U.S. actions is that they've made the calculation supporting Israel is going to further U.S. interests more than pushing for a ceasefire deal. Okay? Take someone like Trump to kind of rip the mask off of that. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.